Hello and welcome. Today's class is a very difficult subject. Today we'll be covering the concept of contraception. It's a difficult subject because it's so personal to so many people. There are many individuals who use contraception. Many, millions and millions use it. And today's lesson focuses on contraception. Now, some people say the church is old-fashioned. Some people say the church is countercultural because we don't allow artificial contraception. But in reality, the church is not countercultural. In reality, the church is uncultural. It's not cultural at all. The church will never really fit into a culture. It never really fit into a certain nation or a certain idea of thinking, because the church is outside of culture with all of her teachings. Because the church tries to follow Jesus, and Jesus doesn't fit inside one particular culture. And therefore, the church, if it truly follows Jesus, will never fit into one particular culture. Cultures change. They change all the time, but the church won't. I think this is actually why the church is so universal. You know, the word Catholic means universal. And because the church, since it doesn't really fit to one culture, it can be used in every single culture. It doesn't matter if you're in America, if you're in Brazil, if you're in Kenya, if you're in Australia, if you're in Japan. The church really can fit into any culture. Now, the one thing about contraception is that it used to be very, very taboo. And a large percentage of the population used to consider it evil. And as the decades went on, as the centuries went on, that changed. Contraception became more and more acceptable. In fact, one little known fact is that before 1930, every single Christian denomination condemned contraception. And then starting in 1930, the Anglicans accepted it in a few certain instances, and that slowly became more and more and more accepted, to the point where only really today the Catholic Church and a few Protestant denominations don't accept contraception at all. Now, one thing about contraception, society's views have shifted in the past. It used to be society was pretty much against contraception, and then it was for it, and the future will hold something completely different. Who knows what the future is going to hold? I don't know. But one thing I can tell you is what the church will hold. The church has stayed steady in her views, and always will. These views the church has had for the last 2,000 years, because our views come from Jesus. And that's one thing to keep in mind, is that these are not just made-up human ideas. We are trying to stay as true as we can to the heart of what Jesus teaches us and what he's telling us. Now, this class, you have a second optional video that I would like you to watch, but you don't have to. It's an interview between Matt Fratt and Jason Everett. Now, this video it's a good video. Some things they talk about are okay, and some things they talk about are really, really good and very, very interesting. If you don't really know how contraception works, if you don't really know the side effects or the negative, both cultural and physical side effects of contraception, I encourage you to watch this video. But one thing I definitely want you to take away from the video is the idea of the natural law. The natural law is very important. Remember, God created the universe to work in a certain way. And these laws that the universe have, we are supposed to abide by these laws. And when we break the laws, there are consequences, just like in the world today. If you run stoplights all the time, there are consequences. Now, eventually, running a stoplight will catch up to you. You can run 100 stoplights and nothing will happen. But eventually, bam, something will happen. And that is the idea of a law. You break a law, sooner or later it's going to catch up to you. And that's the idea of the natural law. Our bodies are supposed to function in a certain way. We should not change them. It's the old concept. If something ain't broke, don't fix it. The video that you're going to watch, that I want you to watch, this optional video, speaks what happens when you take something that's working properly and you try to change it to fit our desires. So, for instance, I like basketball. My wife and I were going to have a son come August, and I want my son to be good at basketball. And so let's say there's a gene therapy that can make my son 7 feet tall. Can I change my son's genes to make him 7 feet tall? The answer is no, because there's nothing wrong with my son's genes. He is working and functioning completely fine. And you don't change something if it isn't broken. And that's the idea of contraception. You don't use contraception if the body's already working properly. There's a strange phenomenon in the Catholic Church, in that those that follow the church's teachings on sexuality and contraception, they actually become more green in every other area of their lives. The food they eat is more natural. Even the soap they use is more natural. All these aspects of their life, they try to become more green. They try to become more natural in everything they do. When it comes down to it, the church has said that we should be natural in the way we use our bodies. God has a natural plan for the universe, and our bodies are no exception. He made our bodies to work in a certain way. One thing about the human body that is amazing is how well it works. And men and women, sexually, their bodies come together. They have this natural, amazing qualities. The interview between Matt Fratt and Jason Everett speaks a little bit about this connection between the man and the woman, but just a little bit toward the end of the video. But there are so many connections sexually between the man and the woman that human beings don't even know about. It's really, really amazing. If we are in class, if we can get into a few of these, but since we don't have time in a short video like this, we won't. But the man and woman's bodies were made to work together, and if you make conflict in the way it's supposed to work, there are consequences. The video that you're going to watch has some of the negative side effects, not all of them, but some of the negative side effects of not following God's natural plan. Now, since the church is against artificial contraception, many people think that the church thinks you should just breed like rabbits. Have as many kids as you can, have 10, 12, 15, 20. St. Catherine of Siena, she was one of 24 children. Of course, many of her siblings died. But the church does not say you have to have as many children as you can and you get pregnant as often as you can. That's not what the church teaches at all. The church actually says there are legitimate reasons to postpone pregnancy. There are legitimate reasons not to have a child. These can be financial reasons. If spouse is out of a job, legitimate reason. There was one time my wife and I, we both lost our jobs within 24 hours of each other. That would have been a legitimate reason not to have a child. There are psychological issues. If one or both of the parents is psychologically not well, that's a legitimate reason to postpone pregnancy. There are physical reasons. I have a friend who's going through cancer treatment right now, and that would be a legitimate reason to postpone a pregnancy. Now, there's a difference between a legitimate reason and an excuse, and we all know the difference, right? Now, the idea between I lost my job and I just want a nicer house, there's a legitimate reason, and then there's excuses. You see it all times in your life, right? I didn't do my homework. Was there a legitimate reason why? Like, were you literally not able to do it, or did you just have an excuse? My friend asked me to help him move on Saturday. Do I have a legitimate reason to? Let's say I don't want to help my friend move. I don't mind helping him move, but let's say I didn't, right? Do I have a legitimate reason? Like, I just can't. I cannot do it. Or do I have an excuse? Like, I could do it, but I can make up an excuse. And that's what the church wants us to do. It wants us to have, if you want to postpone pregnancy, you can do that, but have a legitimate reason. It's the idea that I want to follow God's plan. I don't want to do what I want to do. I want to do what God wants to do. Christianity, one of the hardest things about Christianity is we find God as the master. We follow God in everything. We serve God in everything. But in life, a lot of times we want to become the master. We say, I want to say what's right and wrong. This is what the sin of Adam and Eve was in the garden. And the sin of Adam and Eve is Eve and Adam said, you know what, God has this plan, and I like God's plan a lot, but there are some aspects when I want to follow my own plan. And the key of Christianity is says, no. I'm not the master. God, you are the master. And that's what makes Christianity so difficult. It's so hard to follow. Now, when it comes to the difference between a legitimate reason and an excuse, the church doesn't define that at all. It will not tell you, now this and this and this and this are legitimate reasons, but if you have this situation, it's not, and you have to have a kid. The church doesn't do that at all, right? The church just gives us guidelines. And our job is to discern how it happens best. Some people think the church wants to control us, and that's not actually true at all. The church doesn't want to control us. The church actually just wants to give us guidelines. Like this, if you live this way, this is the best way to serve the master. And if you live this way, this is the best way to live. Not the easiest way. That's very important. The church is not giving us the easiest way to live. A lot of times contraception is the easy way. It's not going for the easy way. It's going for the best way. And so the church doesn't control us. The church says, here are the guidelines. Try to follow them as best you can. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And a lot of times it's good to have someone to talk to and someone who's smart and wise to help you figure things out. But if you try to follow the church's guidelines, the guidelines that Jesus Christ himself has given to us, you'll be just fine. When a couple gets married, one of the things they say in their wedding vows, when they get up in front of everyone, is say that they're open to children. And that's what Christ wants us to do. He wants us to be open to children because sex naturally produces children. And the thing about being open to children is you're willing to have them come into your lives. But the church teaches you don't have to always have children. You can space your children accordingly. And this is where the Catholic idea of natural family planning comes in. Natural family planning, often called NFP, is a natural type of birth control. Now, what makes it different is that artificial. See, the church is not against spacing children. What we're against is artificially spacing children. There are two things you want to do. Number one, make sure you think you have legitimate reasons and not excuses. If you avoid pregnancy for legitimate, serious reasons. You don't do it for excuses. And number two is if you do avoid pregnancy, you use a natural reason. This goes back to the natural law. Our bodies are supposed to work, supposed to function in a certain way, and we do not confront, we do not go against the natural way in which our body is supposed to function. Now, natural family planning, you can do a little research about it. If we were in class, we'd talk about it a little bit more, but unfortunately, we don't have the time with this online formats. If you get married in the church, you'll hear about natural family planning some more. The basics of what it is a woman ovulates. She has a whole cycle. However, a woman can only really get pregnant about 5-ish days. A woman's ovulation, when she actually is able to get pregnant, it's only a window of about 1 day, about 24 hours. And however, sperm can live up to 5, sometimes up to 7 days, right? And so there's really only a window of really about 5 days where a woman can get pregnant. And when a woman ovulates, when she's getting ready to become fertile and able to have a child, her body gives up all sorts of markers, all sorts of signs. There are tons of signs that a body's woman gives off that she is preparing to be able to have a child. Natural family planning, what it does is it reads those signs, it can tell those signs, and it will give an indication, okay, you don't want to get pregnant right now, or a better terminology is you can't get pregnant right now. It's really a detrimental thing. Therefore, you abstain from having sex during this time period, and you read these markers. We won't talk a whole lot about natural family planning. It's about it. But essentially, it's a natural way to avoid pregnancy. A couple things about it is, one, it's actually extremely effective. It's as effective as other form of birth control, like the condom and the pill. It's just as effective when used properly. I think one of the best things about it, actually, is the success rate. Couples that use natural family planning and who follow church's teaching, their divorce rate hovers somewhere around 1%. Whereas the common culture, the divorce rate is anywhere between 30, 40, 50%. Couples that use natural family planning and follow church teaching, they have a very, very, very highly successful marriage rate. Now, this natural method does not violate the natural law. In fact, it follows the natural law. It uses what God has built into our bodies to create a natural way in which we can achieve or avoid pregnancy. That's another amazing thing about natural family planning, is actually if you want to achieve pregnancy, it is by far the best way. In fact, pretty much all fertility doctors the first thing they'll do is use some method of natural family planning to try and achieve pregnancy. Your reading this week are excerpts from Humanae Vitae. Humanae Vitae was an extremely controversial encyclical. An encyclical is a letter. It was written by Pope Paul VI back in 1968. And this letter, it talks about the Catholic response to the concept of birth control, more specifically artificial birth control. I'm not going to read the entire encyclical. Instead, I want you to focus on a few select paragraphs that I'll outline in the reading. Watch the optional video. I do highly suggest that. It'll increase your learning. God bless you all. Have a good day.